Hey guys, welcome to the video, and I hope you guys are ready because this video is going to be about 5 badasses that are badasses in my book for unorthodox reasons. They might be not your typical badasses because they're not the ones that come into your head initially. When you think about a badass, you're more like Sasuke, Itachi, Taketsugi, Levi, all those guys. But these guys, I picked them out because they have like really cool anime moments and they fit to be classed as badasses. So before we get into the video, if you like our content and you want to see more, because we're going to be making stuff about anime that we love, about things we love in anime, we want to make more and discuss more about anime with the community, get invested in the community. So if you want to be a part of that and you want to have sort of influence in like what type of videos you want to see as well, just comment down below. And also you can contact us on our Twitter account, and also you can subscribe to the channel, and so whenever we upload videos you can have more video, you can see our videos as they come up. So without further ado, I hope you guys liked the video, and now let's get into that intro. So starting off, we're going with Sakata Gintoki from Gintama. So I think he's one of the more straightforward, like endurance tanks badasses on the list. And going into him, I'm going to talk more specifically about an incident that happened in an arc that actually revolves around him being kind of like a tank. But his whole aesthetic and the reason why he fits on sort of this unorthodox list is because he's I wouldn't say he's a gag character, but he kind of follows those standards, those like rules for being a gag character. He's like the lazy guy. He's the one that always does the stupid stuff. Some incidents happen in the show where he's like some guy walks up to a friend of his and falls down. He's like, "Oh, you hurt my arm!" Like she barely touched him, and he does the exact same thing to the guy. So like he has very little morals as a person. He's not like your Luffy or Naruto's. He's like a very like humor based character, and when it comes down to it he becomes very serious. So the show itself, Gintama, if you haven't actually seen it, it's just basically about this guy who makes up this company called Objobs Gin, and it starts with this thread of like a shonen story, and like, oh, he some few characters revolve around him, and they come in, they join the company, they work with him, and he goes around meeting people and like having this whole story undertone of like, oh, he's making some type of progress even though he's completely broke. But then you have the elements of Gintama that sprinkle into this standard storyline, and it has like aliens and spaceships and terrorists. They have like this mayonnaise addict, this crazy police unit. They include so much meta humor and parodies in the show that it's insane. Like if you've watched, it's like an anime's anime, right? It's like it gives so much homage to like One Piece, Naruto, all these other shonen other shows, and it makes fun of them sometimes. And it's like the most funniest battle shonen that has a down to heart, heartfelt story within it, and it puts Sakata Gintoki right in the middle of all of this. He basically has so many layers to him as a character, whether it's from his humor side, whether it's from his heartfelt compassion side, whether it's from his action intense side. He has all these layers, and this part that I want to talk about is his rage, more specifically in this video. There was one of the moments in this arc. Basically, they had this arc where they had a general civil war in the entire city that he lives in, and there were these different factions that had to clash together because they all had their own ideals on what they wanted to achieve from making everybody fight together. And in this arc, there's a guy called Jirocho who's like the black version of Gintama because they look basically alike. The hair is kind of similar. The younger version looks like him. They dress similar at when he was younger. So he's like the dark old version of Gintama. And after like 200 episodes, this guy gets introduced, and he's like this insane warrior veteran that's like super crazy strong, and he gets introduced into this arc, and the arc starts with like some Nami wannabe looking out like looking for like the strongest warrior in the city, and she goes up to Gin like face to face, squares up to him, removes her sword, tries to cut him down, and he just breaks her sword like instantly, like immediately, no challenge, and he's using this like wooden sword, he doesn't have like a metal blade type sword. He uses this wooden sword that typically you would find like in most shonen like characters use for like practicing. Like when you're training as a swordsman, you use that for practicing, and he has that as his main weapon, and he cuts her blade instantly without like her even really like clocking what's going on. And as he's going to go attack her because she's attacking him, she just starts begging him, like, "Oh no, big bro, just teach me how to fight. I'm just looking for like the strongest guy. I'm trying to make this city turn red by killing everyone and stuff." And it's like this weird start to an arc. And when the arc progresses, the part where Gin becomes relevant to sort of this list is where he meets the Jirocho guy, who she's the daughter of the Jirocho guy, the Nami wannabe looking character, is the daughter of the guy. And the arc progresses into this Jirocho guy fighting and attacking a friend of Gin. And for what they know, he's basically killed her. And then Gin gets like mad rage pissed, which doesn't happen as often as the other moments, but when it does happen, it's like this really impressive moment, because what Gin does is like he rages Jirocho, and Jirocho is like this guy that's like, "Oh, I'm sure you can't touch me because you're so weak, right?" There, and Gin slaps him across the face, throwing him across like this field. They're fighting in like a graveyard, and he hits like this headstone, and then the guy's like surprised, like, "Oh, I can't believe you did that to me." And then he gets back up, he goes and he starts slapping Gin around the place. And then you know that sword I was talking about that Gin uses, the wooden one. He breaks Gin's sword off, and mid-air, Gin holds the edge of the sword, stabs the guy in like, he holds the sword and he stabs him straight in, and you're like, what the heck? Because it's like mid-air moment, they just clashed, and Gin just kind of improvises mid rage, stabs him, and this guy's just so surprised. He's baffled by the fact that this guy improvised so like quickly, and that's like the moment they first meet. And when they progress further into the arc, towards the end of the arc, the more specific moment I'm trying to talk about is when they have like this face off, right? So the arc is concluded, all the story plots are coming to a head, and then you have this face off the between three factions specifically now. One that wants to kill both Gin and Jirocho, and you have Gin and Jirocho just standing there in the middle of like these assassins, professional killers, like alien. And they just start going through these characters, these assassin, no name assassin characters. They're supposed to be like, they've been set up in the previous arcs to be like really intensely strong, and these guys just look at it and they start laughing their asses off. And then you have them just go through, like cut through them like knife through butter. They're just raging past them, and the only thing they're both thinking, and Gin is like, you know, we're gonna defeat all these mad, crazy, strong as hell assassins. But the thing that I want right now is to kill you. And they just go through them. They kill all of them. And the moment they're about to like get that like, so they get like seriously hurt through the battle and stuff. They aren't able to fight one another. But that moment where Gin just rages, right? He like goes into this beast mode and he's able to take anyone, and he's tanking attacks like crazy, because it's not like they don't get cut or anything. They get cut, slashed in their necks, their arms, uh all sorts of things, because these guys are professionals as well. And it's like to the point where they could actually even die, but they're just so enraged and pumped on adrenaline that they just keep going. They just keep going and going and going. And just the sight of like Gin with like the red eyes and red everything, blood all over him, and then they're just in this room with like corpses of dead bodies of assassins that they've defeated, and it's like so insane. He's like so epic, honestly, in those moments. And I gotta give it to him, to be honest. The thing I love about Gin so much is that in one arc he stood there like a bootleg Luffy. He dresses up like a bootleg Luffy with the straw hat and the red clothes, and he's running around doing crazy stuff in one arc. And the next arc he's going like hammer crazy, beating the shit out of like these intense, really big characters. And that's honestly one thing about Gin that I feel is like, that for me classes him as a badass, and it takes him to that next step, I feel, as a character in general. And on to the next one, we're gonna have Sukuna from Jujutsu Kaisen. So basically, I don't even know where to start with this guy. Like, I think on this list, he's probably the most straightforward. Like, okay, you're putting a list of badasses, Sukuna on it, that makes sense, right? Because he's like just so cool, and his aesthetic, like the big villain type vibe, and sort of that demon vibe. But one thing that I got from Sukuna was the unorthodox level of his badassery. So the fact that this guy's actually a meme king, like he supports the meme. Like if this guy was online, he would be posting memes constantly, because like he doesn't care. Like that's one dimension to this show that I feel like when it started, people thought like, oh, he's going to be like the Kurama of Naruto, right? The sealed beast. Itadori's going to get more powers, all that kind of thing. And then they flip the switch on that storyline because Sukuna becomes this like, oh, he doesn't care what happens to Itadori. Itadori can die for all he cares. He doesn't give a flip. Because in the show, it's kind of like he's nerfed as a badass because first off he's sealed, and then he fights off with no face mask Kakashi. He battles off with no face mask Kakashi, and then you see like he gets slapped easy, and then it's like, well, Itadori is able to handle him and stop him from coming up to the surface easy, and so he's like kind of nerfed as a badass, right? But what happens later on is that his character progresses to be this type of like, oh, he doesn't care, and whenever he gets a handle on something, he's not letting go. And Itadori comes up with this curse spirit he isn't able to defeat, and he switches with Sukuna in that moment, and Sukuna defeats the curse spirit. He starts to realize like, what can I do to like piss off Itadori? Because he knows that Itadori can come back. But then when he realizes Itadori can't come back, he formulates this plan to go against Megumi and probably initially tries to kill him or attack him or something like that. And then when he fights him, he's like, oh, wait, you have a power that's strong enough that I'd like to see. Okay, let's bring Itadori back. And then he just leaves. Like, for no other reason than he just wanted to. Because he initially was like, oh, he's just going to go off with his body and do whatever. And then he finds someone that has a power or strength that he's interested in. And he's like, okay, I'll watch you from the sidelines. Let me just go back and chill. And then he just goes back. And then the moment where Itadori like needs his help against Mahito, and the sort of the first season where after Junpei is killed, right? And then Itadori goes up against Mahito, and you have this sort of moment where Itadori needs Sukuna's help again, and that's the traditional shonen moment where sort of he gets that power up. In Naruto, when Naruto faced Neji, and he got that Kurama power up from nowhere. So this is that traditional moment, but the Jujutsu Kaisen writing is so. I feel was so good in this moment because not just the killing of Junpei, but for Sukuna going, yeah, I'm not going to help you. And he just started laughing. He was memeing on Itadori so hard. And honestly, if the story keeps unfolding in the same way the manga does, his character Sukuna just does so much more meme like, oh, I don't care about Itadori, I'm going to do my own thing kind of things, that it's so, I feel like, a departure from your standard storytelling. And I think I'd need a whole video to dedicate to Itadori because of how the story writing revolves around this character. But for Sukuna as a badass, um, as sort of this meme king and memes on Itadori consistently, I just love to see it, and I really just appreciate that part of his character. To be honest, not that he's like your standard demon that's sealed and gives off power, but no, he's like, oh, and he's not even like, one of the things that I also like is that he's not even like doing some extra next level plot. He's not trying to do any big brain ideas of like, oh, I'm going to trick Itadori. So he only tricked Itadori on one moment where he made a pact with him and then he killed him instantly. And Itadori forgot that pact. But aside from that, most of the time he's just like, and even that pact, if you go further into the story, it turns out that he's just memeing on Itadori again, because like you look at the pact that he made with him and he was like, oh, I'm just going to come out on your body for a little while and then I'm going to go back, that's just what I want. And then Itadori is like, nope. And then he's like, okay, let's make a pact, if I kill you, that's it. And then he kills him. And then it's like, just that level, that layer of his character, that's not just your typical villain badass thing. It's your, oh, I want to be fighting strong guys and I don't care about whatever you do. I'm not here for you, because if there was another vessel, it would be the same thing for Sukuna, and I think he needs more appreciation personally. So for our next badass or character with a badass moment, we're gonna have someone that's not your standard Chad. Because when you think about badass, you think about like a gym buff, epic character. This next guy is going to be more of a big brain flexor, and the one I'm going to pick from here is Norman from The Promised Neverland. Okay, so this kid, I don't know how to say it. He's just got like incredible, I don't know, should I say big brain tactics? Because, like, amongst the three characters, it's portrayed like he's like the smartest, even though they have their own attributes that they're better than him at, or they have certain factions of intelligence that they're more attuned to than him. But he has this, like, greater, calm, collected attitude that allows him to see things better than the other characters and to plan things out better than the other characters, as to where those guys are a bit more rash and more short sighted. He's able to assess plans in a more collected way that allows him to view different possibilities and to get probably the best outcome that they could ever wish to have. And so the moment where I thought like, okay, this guy is different from all of them, is where he made the plan for them, to escape the farm. Like, if you haven't seen Promise Neverland, I highly suggest you go and see it. Honestly, even just go check it out as soon as possible, because like this guy makes a plan for them to escape. I guess it's spoilery territory if you haven't seen it, but like he goes and sets up this plan for them to escape this impossible, seemingly impossible situation, because they have to get past a giant wall, they have to get past a deep cliff, they have to also get past monsters that will be chasing them. And when he's eventually decided that he's going to be sent off a day earlier, and his friends are asking him to wait and to not do anything and to maybe hide and wait, so they form the plan and everyone escapes. He's like, no, I'm going to go, and I'm going to sacrifice myself, and I'm going to make this plan for you guys to escape this place, for all of you to escape. And I personally think, this is out of sort of what the video is about, but I personally think he has a plan to, in general, escape their capture. So he did eventually go to the demons and stuff, but I don't think he's going to be killed. I think if we're lucky, he's going to come back in uh, a future season or something, and he's going to come in with like, oh, I found this way and tactics, and he just somehow outsmart everyone there and be able to escape. Because the one thing is with the Coney thing, she was killed immediately. So the first girl that we saw that was killed, she was killed immediately. But Norman wasn't. He was told to go into a specific room rather than just stay there and get killed like everyone else. So I think something's going to happen that he's going to sort of escape. But with the main escape story that makes him fit into this list for me, what goes on is that he uh, he plans how they would need to sort of get a rope across the cliff. The point, he went around all of the wall to find where is the nearest point for us to go past the cliff, so we don't have to go through the bridge, which was their initial plan, which would have failed because the monsters are in the bridge. Um, so he found, okay, they just need to get above the wall, and when they get above the wall, not to fall into the cliff, they need to practice throwing this like ropes. Basically, they make the system they can use to escape, and he plans all that out, and he sort of figures out that his friend is planning to sacrifice himself and kill himself, and he utilizes that. He does this in a space of like, what, 10-15 minutes, like in a very short time. He goes around, he plans the tactics, he realizes that his friend is planning on sacrificing himself, and he takes that plan of his friend to burn himself and converts it into a plan to burn the building, so that they are able to escape from the mother without the mother knowing, and allowing most people to escape, because he can, it's easy, I think it's more easy for him to make a plan for the three of them to escape. And if he wanted to, they could have escaped all, only the three of them. But then he had to take into consideration that there were other people that were supposed to get out, and so he sacrificed himself for that reason. And I don't know, for me that was epic. Like, it took him such a short time to figure out where they needed to go, where they needed to be, what they needed to do, who was planning what else, how long, or how that plan would have gone, and how they could readjust Ray's plan. So the dark-haired Ray guy, his plan, readjusting that into a greater plan for them to escape. So personally, that was epic from Norman, and I think he's gone. No, he can't be gone. He's too cool. He's just too cool to be gone. To be honest, it's like Attack on Titan killing in Levi. So that's not happening. And speaking of Attack on Titan, we're going to go into Eren Jaeger. And as for Eren Jaeger, I mean, what what can't I say about this guy? To be honest, because the impact of Eren, or not the impact, but rather the change of his character from, the whiny brat in the earlier seasons who was just on about killing titans, wrecking titans, causing destruction, who was basically your standard wimp. He basically was like all bark and no bite, because like he would face up against the titan and he wouldn't be able to do anything, to the point where he was actually even killed in the earlier versions of the show. So if he wasn't a titan, right? And he was eaten by, I don't know if I should call it, but Santa Claus Titan, the Titan that looks like Santa Claus. He was eaten, and if he wasn't a Titan, he would not have survived that. Even as a Titan, I'm surprised he survived that, because other Titans don't usually survive getting eaten. So he survives getting eaten, and then he goes on this like story, and his story is still him being a wimp and childish, and he gets fortunate with like the titan in him, and uh, the ability to heal himself and all that. But then his initial story was still sort of like weak. I think that for most people, one of the weaker parts for Attack on Titan in general was the early Eren character, because they couldn't relate to him. He was always so whiny, so you know just a little wimp basically. And his transition into this big brain tactical war guy that is showing in the current season that's airing now, which should be the final season if it everything goes to plan, I guess. So in this final season, he's gone in and he's infiltrated a whole country. This is not the same kid that we know who would infiltrate a country on his own by faking to be a sick warrior, and then making plans to trap some of the titans, and then having his own way of bringing Reiner, and sort of having this discussion with him while under the podium where they're having this big sort of event, which is literally based on Eren. Like the whole event, all these political leaders have come in just to talk, just so that this guy from the Tiber family can start talking about how there's a world's most dangerous man, and his name is Eren Jaeger. Like literally, he's on, he's just, he's the subject of this giant event that's happening. And uh, he then goes on to sort of lay he then goes on to sort of disrupt the event in general, and sort of the details of that will be forever whoever ends up watching more of the series, and you'd be able to see what happens. But from there you'd see why he fits on sort of this list. He comes up with like these tactics that are, I guess you wouldn't say your traditional Levi type beast titan type badass character. It's more of your tactical transformed character, which spearheads the transformation of the show in general. Because from this change in Eren's character, the show then becomes more of a geopolitical storytelling, right? It becomes more of something that has to do with different countries, different factions, and who's right, who's wrong, when both sides are kind of right, but then the subject of what they've been told is wrong. And it's like blaming the story and all. And Eren beautifully spearheads the story in that manner. So to move on to the next guy, who is uh I don't know, probably the biggest brain character ever. I'm going to be talking about Senku from Dr.Stone. So come on, if you've watched this anime, you know this guy. He's like he's like insane. Like he remembers so much. He's so smart in all the different facets of like knowledge. Like I don't even know how to explain it better, but in all forms of knowledge, this guy has some type of like understanding. He made his own clothes. He made building construction. We're talking architecture. We're talking, well, maybe not fashion because it's not necessarily the most fashionable, but he still made his own clothes. He made a house. He made utensils. He did some pottery to make some equipment for his lab. This guy made glass. This guy made wire out of copper, which leads me into sort of the flex that I wanted to talk about. Aside from the fact that this guy was counting seconds from the moment he got turned to stone, he was counting seconds so that he remembers the date and time when he finally wakes up. And for him, when he was asked, wait, why did you do it? He was like, well, that's the only logical thing. What? I mean, the only logical thing is to just go unconscious, and then if you regain consciousness, you regain consciousness. This guy had to do parallel processes. He did parallel processes so he could count the time. He would count on to like billions of seconds, and then he would start over one, and he would retain those information up to when he got conscious, and then he remembered the time, and then he didn't need to hold it anymore because the sun was there. And so I don't know, he's just insane. And moving back into the making of wires thing, the moment I wanted to talk about was when he brought electricity into the world after 3,000 odd years, because I think that moment was really beautiful. It was beautifully depicted in anime, and it sort of represents sort of the uh, fact that we take something so relevant for granted, right? Because in that world, at night, it's basically darkness. You're at the mercy of whatever's in the shadows, and you can't go on to build and develop and do a lot when it's dark. But Sukuna comes in and he brings electricity to the world, and he was asked like, "Oh, what's the next thing you're gonna do after making like ramen in like the stone world?" And he was asked that, and he was like, "Well, we're going to make a generator," and everyone is just like, "What?" A flipping generator. And he goes on to make that using by planning out sort of the logistics of everything, and then he goes on to use like strong magnets, charging it up with lightning, and he's like, oh no, there's lightning now, so we have to do this quick. And then he finds like copper and stuff, he turns it into wire. They find this big ass magnet. They find their way up to the top of a mountain. They plant the magnet. The lightning strikes. Then they take this back. They make a generator by making two large plates of copper and having two people muscle generate the whole thing. Like literally, these two guys spamming Chad levels of energy, just going round and round and round and generating the energy. And he goes up and he's like, he creates this what's it called, Edison bulb, I think, if I'm not mistaken, using a bamboo stick and the two wires from the generator, and then by touching them together it lights up. And finally, after 3000 years, after 3700 years, the stone world, or the world, finally regains sort of light in the darkness, which I felt was a really impactful moment in the story. Because right now we can look at even the device you're like watching this on, it has light. You're probably in a room with lights. You're probably not far from a place where there's lights. You're likely in a city where there's lights all over the town in the dark. Even during the day, there's lights everywhere for whatever reason. But in that world, there isn't. And you can think about the impact of that, of like having it for the first time. Obviously, in our world, we had it for the first time, of course, but like to bring that back again. He had so many flexes, but that moment was one of my biggest and most favorite flex from Senku. Alright guys, thank you for listening. This is the end of the video. I've said my piece on these characters. You can say yours down in the comments or on Twitter. We would like to hear from you. If you want this style of video, please tell us. Just leave a like and say like, okay, you want more of this, or if you want something different, or you're interested in seeing something different, you can also leave a comment down below. And thank you for listening. Goodbye.